as your foundation, I want you to remember that human beings have been keeping chickens for thousands of years. This is within us. It is a natural experience for us to have. We're not reinventing the wheel. Here in the Western world, we have a way of kind of like complicating things. But if you look at the whole world, you will find people and their chickens everywhere from every, um, you know, from the poorest people to the richest people. We're all able to do it.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Demme Learning Show. This is Gretchen Rowe, and it is my great pleasure to welcome my friend Dalia. She's going to talk to you today about chickens. I've been waiting for this conversation for months. My husband and I have a whole herd of chickens. In fact, I was saying that he's on his way to the post office to pick up 26 more because he does need a 12-step program for chickens. But I'm delighted to welcome her today. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Oh, well, my name is Dalia, but I am, most people know me as the president of Chickenlandia. I think my biggest platform is my YouTube channel, which is called Welcome to Chickenlandia. I do have a podcast called Bok Talk, and I'm on all the. Oh, I have a book. I have a book called Let's All Keep Chickens, and another online course, which is kind of how we got to know each other, Gretchen. Um, and I am a backyard chicken educator. I've been doing this for about, gosh, almost 13 years. And it is just my passion to share a love of chickens. I will always say chickens they brought peace and joy into my life. And that's really the part of it that I love to share.
When we first met online, because we're on opposite coasts,
Yeah.
when we first met online, I had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit, and I found your story very compelling. So I wondered if you'd share some of that with our viewers today, because I think they'll see themselves in parts of your story, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I did not grow up with chickens. I grew up in the suburbs, I'm a Gen Xer. Um, I ate TV dinners. Not because that's what my mom would make food. My mom made this wonderful food, but I wanted what I saw on television. I wanted whatever was being advertised to me. And I was very disconnected from my food, which I think is a very common experience for a lot of us, especially in our age group. And we may be the first generation to be so disconnected because a lot of us have parents or grandparents that did have chickens or did have a garden or had a farm, or were just in some way more connected to their food and to nature. So in my young adult life, I was in Hollywood trying to become the next great American filmmaker. And I was really pursuing that dream. Um, and I met the man who would become my husband. We got married. And then I had turned 31, and it's like, okay, reality is starting to kick in because I wanted to have a family, but I really didn't want to do that in LA. And nothing against LA. I love LA. I mean, I had a great time in LA.
I was there this past weekend, so it was awesome. The foliage, the weather was perfect. It
Oh
was
yeah. Yeah. The traffic is awful.
no,
But
yes, I will agree with that.
the weather is perfect. The education system, if you're in public education, is it's got some problems. So I was like, I don't think I want us to raise our kids here. So we decided to move up north, and we're in Bellingham, Washington now, which is like 30 minutes south of the Canadian border.
Wow.
And I thought I was great with that decision, this is
That's a
what I'm doing
huge,
now.
that's a huge shift though from that bustling urban area.
Yes. And not only that, but I had had the dream of being in Hollywood and playing that game from the time I was a little girl. And I realized once we got up here and I had my first child, I was delighted. He was adorable. Um, I was very happy to be a mother and a wife and all that stuff. But I was really mourning the loss of that dream.
Mm,
And on top of that, I had postpartum depression. And I think what people don't understand, or maybe some people don't know about postpartum depression, is that it can last years.
yeah.
Like it can be quite serious. And I had
And
postpartum
it's one of
insomnia.
the only afflictions where we blame ourselves
Yeah.
because
Ugh.
you shouldn't feel that way. But I know we have so many moms who will watch our conversation who will see themselves in that. And it's very hard.
Yes.
And it's also if people even in your inner circle feel entitled to tell you, well, you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah. And for me at least, nobody knew. And I didn't know. I didn't know until I looked back at what was going on.
Wow.
Um, and I certainly didn't know how serious it was. It was actually quite serious. So I just found myself really wondering what my identity was. I was depressed. And so naturally I was like, I'm gonna get some chickens like that. That was-
Yeah, that's not the prescription that everyone would make.
And I want to be very clear and say I am not claiming that chickens cure postpartum depression. That is not what I'm saying. Um, but I really feel like it was some kind of divine intervention because when I brought my first batch of baby chicks home, and I did like all the research and stuff, and I brought these baby chicks home. I took them, one by one out of the brooder. I'm placing them into the brooder. And I had not even I think I had held a baby chick once before that. And they were so, I'm holding them and they're so like resilient and fragile at the same time.
Mhm.
I really feel like, in that moment, my heart opened and a new dream came in. And it gave me something to really look forward to every day. It got me outside every day. I became passionate about something that, I mean, I was so passionate about it that literally 6 months later, that was when I was asked to teach my first class, and that was at the local community college. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I've had chickens for 6 months. Like,
Oh, no,
but
wait, back
I
up for
didn't,
just a second and talk to me a little bit about the research you did beforehand. Because for us, when we got chickens, it was going through a catalog and going, well, that one's pretty,
yeah,
and that one's pretty.
yeah. And
I,
certainly,
we
yeah, I mean,
tend
there's
to
a lot of
fly a
that.
little bit by the seat of our pants here. So,
At the time, um, backyard chicken keeping was really starting to gain momentum. It was like the time really where a lot of educators were getting in there and they were gaining a lot of popularity very quickly. There was a lot of disagreement among the educators, so it was confusing because I would read one thing and then, and they would say, this is the absolute thing that you must do. And if you don't do it, you're doing it wrong. And then I would read another thing from another educator that I really respected. I respected both of them. And they would be like, well, if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong, and be very public about their disagreements and stuff. And I was like, this is wild. Like, this is chicken keeping. It's not, I always say it's chicken keeping. It's not world hunger. It's chicken keeping. Okay. Like, chill out. Um, but it did get confusing because naturally people are consuming a lot of information. It's very easy to consume lots of information. A lot of that information is conflicting. And then I would join like a Facebook group. And back then it would be like there were these like online forums. It wasn't so much on social media, but there were
Almost like
online forums.
CompuServe and those kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And it could get so there was a lot of like vitriol and which is like, what is going on? Like, this is my peace and joy. And we're like fighting about it. Why? Why even with chickens are we fighting about that? So from early on, I really had the desire of not taking that route because for me, it was like talking to people about chickens. I could talk to someone who was very different from me, but grew up differently, different, on opposite ends of the political spectrum, different religious philosophy, whatever. And I could talk to them about how I felt so much peace in the chicken yard, and we'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's funny that you should say that. One of my closest friends, we've been friends now for 8 years, and we became friends because of chickens.
Yeah.
As a mutual friend said,
There
you should
you
go
go.
talk to her. She has chickens too. Like you can both be crazy together.
Yeah.
And she's right. And it was awesome.
Yeah, I definitely was a certifiably crazy chicken lady. So I understood that, and I think it just came out. It must have just been oozing out of my pores because, like I said, I had the community college asked me to teach a class, and I taught that class, and it was great. And then and of course, I was very diligent about because I didn't have a lot of experience, but I just wanted to make sure I was getting the right information out there. Um, and then it was like, well, I'm being asked to do seminars and I'm being asked to rep, a feed company. And I mean, like a lot of stuff just started coming to me. And there's a quote from Steven Spielberg, and I'm not quoting him directly. But it's something like the dream of your life is the one that kind of sneaks up behind you. Something like that.
Mhm.
And that's how it was. I really didn't I certainly as a kid didn't think, "Oh, I'm gonna be a backyard chicken educator." Like that was that wasn't what I thought. I wanted to reach a lot of people. I wanted to help people. I wanted fame. I'm not gonna lie. Like that's what as a kid, I was like, "Oh, I want to be famous."
Sure.
Um, but I always thought that it would happen like through Hollywood or whatever,
And the
being a
things that you
writer.
produced there.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Um, I did not know that this was the road that I would take, but I'm very happy to be on this road. It has allowed me to really have more balance in my life like I have. And I do get unbalanced, believe me, but it helps for me to have like this thing that I'm really passionate about, but I'm still at home. I can still take care of my kids.
sure.
I'm still really involved with them. Not saying that moms that aren't, that work away from home can't be involved with their kids. They can. But for me, this is what worked really well, and it's just been such a blessing. Um, so yeah, I love it.
So tell me how you got started. Did you did all this research. Did you order chickens? Did you go to Tractor Supply? I mean, my husband's not allowed to go to Tractor Supply unaccompanied between March and May. So,
I I had a friend that worked at a local farm store, and he really helped me to pick out, to order some chicks and to get what I wanted. And so I ordered, it was just crazy. I ordered like uh frizzles and I just like decided to get every funny little chicken. Now, the advice that I give now is different from that because it's tougher when you start out with specialty chickens, then you get into winter and or you get into summer, it's really hot and you haven't really thought about the breeds that you have and whether or not they're going to do well in the climate that you live in. So, and then also there's the issue of roosters. Like you can get roosters if you order bantams, which are like miniature chickens. You are very likely to get roosters, and you can even get a rooster if you order all female chickens, okay,
Yeah.
which are called pullets. Like a pullet is a female chicken that has not gone into lay yet. They haven't begun to lay yet. So, even then it's not foolproof unless they're feather sexed, which is only certain breeds.
Right.
Um, it's not foolproof. You might get a rooster. So I do tell people to have a plan, know what you're capable of. There are people that are like, well, if I get a rooster, I'm just going to make some broth. Not everybody can do that, especially new chicken keepers.
Sure.
They might be like, I thought I could and I can't. So have a contingency plan for those cases. The other thing I really want people to have a contingency plan for is uh well, you need to know that hens do not lay the amount of eggs that they lay for the first year or two of their life for their whole life, and they can live pretty
Correct.
long. Sometimes they can live 10 years. Usually not. Usually a production hen is going to live a average of about 4 to 6 years. Okay. But you're taking really good care of them. You've got them in this, great backyard. You built the Taj Mahal for them. Yeah, they can live a long time, and they don't lay as much. They'll never lay as much as they lay that first year of life.
Right.
So, because production breeds were bred just to live that year and lay as many eggs in that year and then be processed for dog food or whatever.
Right.
Um, so if you were the kind of person that's like, oh, well, that's fine. When they're done laying that much, I will make broth. Um, but you might find after you've had them and you have learned their little personalities and they looked you in the eye and you gave them a name, maybe you can't do that. So what are you prepared to keep them through their whole lives?
Right.
Or
And
or,
it
or do
does
you
make
have
it makes a tremendous amount of difference to be able to know what you're capable of. On our little farm, we had chickens and pigs and bees, and we sent our last two pigs to freezer camp 2 months ago, and friends said, "Oh, how could you do that?" But we went in knowing
yeah.
that we were raising these pigs and we were going to raise them holistically and organically, and they were going to have an amazing life. And then they were going to go to the freezer.
Yeah.
And but I think you make a really valid point is we have to be honest about our expectations
Yeah.
and be able
And
to,
my only request is that it be humane. And by humane, I don't mean you have to have to have a retirement home for chickens. But humane means you need to keep in mind that this is a living, breathing being that is under your care, and let's be respectful of that life in front of us. And that might mean that we're going to make soup, but uh just, be humane about it.
right?
Because
So how many chickens do you have now?
43.
43. Okay.
43. Yeah.
All right. Um, okay, I'll have you beat in about 3 hours, but
Yes.
right now you've got me beat. So I have to say the thing that I was least prepared for was picking up the chicks from the post office and how loud they were going to be.
Yeah.
That ride home was the noisiest ride I've ever had. And I have 6 kids. I just wasn't expecting that. But man, were they a lot of fun. And you
Yeah.
can see personalities in that very first day. Some of them would hop on your hand, and some of
Yeah.
them would be like, "Oh no, no, no,
Yeah.
you go
No.
away from me, human."
Yeah. 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 I like to say some of them, they just have a little bit of people in them, like you just look at them and they're looking back at you and you're like, I feel like we get some kind of connection going on,
They've got
and
a
I didn't
crowd right
expect
now that
that.
my husband says, pound for pound, they are the nosiest birds he's ever seen, because no matter what he's doing outside, they all come running over,
Yes.
going, so what are you doing? And they'll hop up on him. I've looked out in the backyard and he's had 8 chickens on his back while he's bending over trying to fix something. And they're all like participatory, which I think is hilarious. So
Yes.
I have a good question for you. It says, what breeds do you find the most docile or friendly?
Well, this is I get this question a lot. I also get like, what are the most quiet breeds? I want the quietest breeds. I want them to lay the most. I want them to be docile, and I want them to be friendly. And what I will tell people always is that every chicken has its own personality. And so it's important to remember that there are some breeds that generally they're just going to be easier for people when they're starting out, but you can always get one that, oh, this is supposed to be a quiet chicken and they sing the egg song for 2 hours. And the egg song is the buck, 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 that is, I laid an egg. And then there's another song that sounds close to that is, there's danger.
Right.
So it's interesting that the two sound so alike. But if you're looking for a large standard size breeds, good layers, really like Buff Orpington, Barred Rock, Black Australorp, which is basically the Buff Orpington, but it's black.
Black. Yes.
Um the Easter eggers, otherwise known as Americanas, which there are purebred Americanas, but you will not find them from a hatchery. From a hatchery, what you're getting is Easter eggers, even if it says Americanas, you're
Mhm.
getting Easter eggers, which is fine.
So
Um,
explain I know what an Easter egger is, but for somebody who might be watching us, explain what that might be.
an Easter egger they were made famous by Martha Stewart, actually. They're a breed they're not a true breed. They were created from Americanas and Araucanas, I think.
Aracanas, yeah.
Um, and what people love about them is that they could lay green eggs, they could lay blue eggs, they could lay pink eggs, and they might lay brown eggs.
Mhm.
They will lay one color egg for their whole life. They don't lay different color egg every day. Um, but usually if you want like some color in your basket, then you'll want some Easter eggers, and that it's going to be really pretty. Um, so yeah, and they can come in all different, like they come in all different kind of colors and stuff. Very pretty birds with little, especially when they're babies, they look like little baby owls. Like they've got like a beard. Um, and they're just super cute.
I think they're very regal. We don't
Puffy
have any
cheeked.
right now. We've always had them. And in fact, that's what my husband is picking up today. The most variety in the crowd are Easter eggers because I wanted them again because I
Yeah.
miss that variety of eggs. We have all brown egg layers right now, but we also have the friendliest chickens right now I've ever had, and they're called red stars, and they are
Yeah.
nosy, but they're loud. They are
Yeah.
talkative, they have opinions, they will come right up to you and talk to you, and they have all sorts of different sounds. And it's really funny because they are very entertaining. Uh,
Yeah.
that's
And
neat.
that's a hybrid. So that's a
Yes.
hybrid breed. Um, and definitely guaranteed to get lots of eggs.
Yes. We have 25. We started out with 28. We had a hawk who
Mm,
unalived 3 of them for us
yeah.
before we figured out that if we fed the crows every day at different times of day, so the crows would be around more often, now we don't have a hawk problem anymore.
Yeah.
But the crows will
Yeah.
sit out on my fence outside my office window and yell like, "Hey, you didn't bring me peanuts. Where are my peanuts?"
Yeah.
But we get
So,
about 24 eggs a day.
oh, good for you. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Um, but just to finish up with this person's question, bantams are like there's some bantams that are going to be really friendly, like bantam cochins, silkies. um those are going to be really friendly, funny little chickens. And sometimes bantams can be a little bit more flighty, but the cochins and the silkies, they're not very flighty. They're They're more like to the ground birds, and they can be super friendly. But, any chicken, if you want them to be sweet, handle them from the time that they're baby chicks. And sometimes they'll always be skittish, but
So the
have
next
some
question
have
I have
some
for you is, what's your personal
rubs.
favorite breed?
Oh, this is so
Oh
hard. I
dear,
tell all
that's
my
a hard.
chickens. Yeah. I tell all my chickens I love them equally. I think probably Old English Game bantams. They're itty bitty
They're
tiny.
tiny.
Yeah.
I've only
And
seen them in pictures. I've never actually seen one live.
yeah, and I love naked neck chickens. Like anything with a naked neck. I have naked dogs. I have hairless dogs. And like I don't know what it is, but
They
the
definitely are
showgirls.
very odd looking. And I will say we've only had one. We the second year that we had chickens, a friend of a friend said she had to move. She had half a dozen chickens. Would we be willing to take them off her hands? And of course we said yes. So there were two naked necks and a bantam and three other birds that I now don't remember. But we inherited these chickens and they were here with us for years. It was really fun.
They are so funny. I think I can just relate to them being funny looking and but to me they're beautiful. I don't know. Just love it.
Well, okay, so we had some really terrific questions, and I'd love to turn my attention a little bit to those questions so I don't forget them.
Okay.
Um, so how much time does it take to care for chickens? And I know I asked you this before we began our conversation today. I know that
Yeah.
also you had some qualifiers there, so I'll let you go into those.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends. It depends on your setup. It obviously depends on how many chickens you have. Um, there are certain things that you can do every day that just don't take that much time that will in the long run, help you kind of lower the amount of time that you have to be cleaning and, taking care of things and give you more time to just enjoy them. So if you can get out there and like scrape the roosts every day, so get yourself like a paint scraper, like a putty knife or something. Get the poop off of the roosts. If there's any poop in the nesting boxes, get that out. You can even keep like a little duster, like a Swiffer or like a some kind of like a wool duster or whatever, and dust the coop down. And if you do that every day or every other day or 3 times a week or whatever, you're going to have less of a job to do when it comes time for you to really get in there and deep clean. And that should only take like 5 minutes. Now, a lot of that depends on the user friendliness of your coop. So if you are just getting into it, you really want to look for a coop that is easy for you. Like you have access to everything easily. You don't have to do a lot of like bending over. Um, it's built in a way to make things easier for you. So, one thing that will really, really help is if your coop has, what's called a poop tray. So basically under the roosts, if it's a smaller coop, sometimes there's a tray that you can just like pull out of the back of it
Mhm.
and you can go and just dump that right into your compost pile. A bigger coop, sometimes they'll have the poop trays like built in, or if you can do that, if you find plans, that is like half your battle right there because most of the pooping the chickens do is at night.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
yeah, and they do a lot of pooping. So, and then, user friendly feeders, if you can get a system that you don't have to check every single day. You want to make sure that it's rodent proof and rat proof. Like you really don't want rodents to have access to your feed every night
Right.
because that will cause an infestation. Um, and then waterers that are easy to deal with, to clean out. And that will lower the time that you have to take care of them. I think in general, it's less time than what most people think.
So
Yeah.
what kind of bedding do you use in your coop?
It depends. Right now I'm switching back to hemp bedding, which is really the best. I mean, like hemp bedding is the best.
Really? Okay.
It's low dust, like lower dust. It smells great. It's really absorbent. It breaks down really well. There is one huge drawback, and that is it's expensive. Like hemp
Mm,
bedding is expensive. But if you're doing deep litter, which a lot of people will do deep litter, and if you don't know what that is, you should look up what it is. It sounds completely crazy. But what you're actually doing is like creating a composting system inside your coop. And if you do it right, it can actually be really healthy for the chickens. Um, and it's hard to do it wrong. So if you're doing deep litter, hemp is great for deep litter and it won't cost that much because you have the initial investment of, buying the hemp, but then it lasts a long time. Um,
are all 46 of your chickens in the same coop?
right now I have some little chickens that are living in an igloo cube, that I have about 8 little chickens that are living in there, and they're tiny little chickens, and they just are living in there because I put them in there to integrate them with the bigger flock. But at some point, I will lock them out of there because I really do like all my chickens to live in the same
Mhm.
spot. And then the ducks also live in with the chickens. Now, my coop is huge. It's huge. This is, I will tell people, um, don't look at my coop, even the cube, because the cube is like it's expensive. It's more expensive than a lot of people can afford. Certainly, my big coop is way more expensive than a lot of people can afford. But I don't have skills like to build things, and a lot of people do have that. I didn't have time to repurpose materials, which is absolutely a possibility for you. So I don't want people to look at my setup and say to themselves, "Oh my gosh, I can't afford that." This is my livelihood. This is Chickenlandia. So the money that I make, it goes into my chicken yard, and I also get a lot of stuff for free.
Mhm.
Most people don't have that situation, but you absolutely do not have to have a lot of money to have chickens.
We
If you
have
if
our our original chicken house was uh a dog, it was a dog breeding kennel, so it had multiple runs, and we
There you go.
converted that
Yeah.
run into one run and converted the interior in from kennels into a chicken house. We do use deep bedding, so that
Yeah.
is the way that we choose to go. But I'm laughing thinking about now we're going to have to go back. We have a second coop where we have hasn't been used in a year. We called that the Turkey Taj Mahal. We did turkeys for 2 years, but no, thank you. they're, they're entirely different than chickens.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it like that because there's somebody in our audience who's going to say, but I love my turkeys.
Turkeys
Good.
are so sweet, but not a brain cell in the head.
Oh, I asked so here's my
I
funny
love turkeys.
story. The first year that we did turkeys, we got these turkeys that grew. I'm like, what did you get? 3 Mile Island turkeys. They were
Oh.
enormous. We harvested them 8 weeks early and they were 22, 26, and 28 pounds.
Oh, wow.
They were enormous. So I said to my husband the next year, could you maybe find something that grows to maturity that's
Yeah,
not
heritage. Mhm.
not a
Butterball.
pterodactyl?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I'll do that. But he didn't quite read the whole description. So what he got was show turkeys. He got royal palm turkeys,
Oh, beautiful.
and they were just beautiful, but they don't ever grow. I mean, you're not going to harvest a royal palm turkey
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's no meat on their bones. They're just a lot of feathers and no
Yeah.
meat.
I love turkeys. Like, I absolutely love them. They're so personable and sweet. And, um, but yeah, when they're babies, they're a little bit more fragile than baby chicks.
So I have
And
another question for you. And
yeah.
this is actually, you had said something about integrating your little ones with your big ones. And this
Hmm.
is along those lines. It says, what is the best way to integrate chicks into the adult flock? We hatched our own chicks with a broody hen, and she is now with the adults while we wait for the chicks to get big enough.
So if you have baby chicks that were not raised with a mother hen within an adult flock, because you can do that, and in that situation, when the mother hen starts to reject the babies, the flock is so used to the babies and they recognize those babies as members of the flock. They will scold those babies, but they won't hurt them. They won't kill them.
Sure.
Okay, unless it's, I should say never, but um usually it is so much easier to integrate them with the flock if they've grown up with the flock, because if you like went to Kauai and you were walking down the street and there's all these chickens, you're going to see mother hen with baby chicks and she's with a flock.
Right.
So they just like that is part of their dynamics. Like they understand that there's baby chicks. And if any older chickens come to up to the baby chicks and try to mess with them or whatever, mama hen is gonna say, no, we don't do that here. Like, leave my babies alone. Unless she's super low on the pecking order.
Mm.
If you have a hen that's raising baby chicks that's very, very low on the pecking order, you could consider keeping them separate from the flock. Or if you have like an especially aggressive flock, every flock has a different personality. So, there's always exceptions to the rule, but usually you can observe them for a few days. You have them separate. You've got mother hen with baby chicks. If the flock is pretty much ignoring the babies and mother hen is protecting the babies well, you can have them all together. And that's going to make your job so much easier because they're going to integrate really well with the adults. Okay. If for whatever reason you have your baby chicks separate from your adult flock, okay, at 8 weeks, you can put them outside, but they need to be in a separate area, but able to see the flock. So separate, but seeing. So let's say you have your chicken yard, and within that yard, you've got a little, a smaller run. Your baby chicks can go in that run. Okay. And then they will live in there and they're outside, and you can like bring them in at night or put them, they can have their little space within that run to sleep in at night. But the flock is getting used to them. Okay. You never want to, if they're fully feathered, whatever, you never ever want to just throw very young chickens in with a big old batch of adult cranky lady hens. Okay. They can kill the babies.
Right.
So, so yeah, it depends on the personality of your flock. Okay. The younger the baby chicks are, the more submissive they will be. You want them to get a little bit of confidence. If they're the same size, it's standard to standards. Usually at about 12 weeks is when you can open that door and let them intermingle with the flock. Okay. But it depends. You may be able to do it a little bit before that. You might have to wait longer. It depends on the personality of your flock. So you need to be out there and kind of looking at them and getting a feel for how they are with each other. If you're putting little bantams in with, a adult hens or like a mixed flock that's got big chickens in it, those little bantams really need to be almost adults.
Yes.
An adult bantam hen is going to be a lot more assertive and be able to hold their own then, and so it won't matter as much the size. But if they're little, if they're both little and submissive, they could be in danger when you put them in with a bigger flock. So I do have a video on my YouTube channel where I show all of this. Like, it's a whole process that I show, and for a lot of people it's easier to like see the process. And I can't remember what it's called.
So I'm just going to put a plug in here for your
Yeah.
YouTube because it's fascinating. and it's amazing. And it will be included in the show notes because I think it's wonderful for parents to be able to sort of fit themselves in the frame. And your videos are so engaging. The next question actually leads into that a little bit. It says, what resources are available to make getting, raising, and caring for chicks and chickens an integral part of home education? And so the first resource, I'm going to plug your book here because this is amazing. This was so much fun to read. And by the way, if you can't figure out Dalia's sense of humor from the cover of this book, I need to have a talk with you because it was just so much fun. And in fact, when I first read this, I was on a plane to Missouri and I ended up not getting to read as much of it as I wanted to. This was all the way back in March because the lady sitting next to me was like, well, what about this? And what about this? And by the time we were done, we were comparing things in here that you have written about. It was just a blast. It's a perfect book for a homeschool resource. So it's called Let's All Keep Chickens. And it's amazing.
Yes. So yeah, I have the book. The way that I kind of got into the homeschooling circuit, I guess, is that I have an online course and you can find it on my website. It's welcome-to-chickenlandia.com. You can find a link to that information. And I created the course, you know, for people that wanted to get started with chickens. It's like, okay, I'm going to create this online course. And then I started getting these messages from homeschoolers and they're like, we're using your course in our homeschool program. And I was like getting a lot of them. And I was like, oh, okay. So people are using my course in their homeschooling program, which actually was like, this makes sense. And that's when I started like doing the homeschooling podcasts and stuff like that. Cause I realized there's this whole demographic out there that can know about this course and take it. So absolutely, my book is like, it's got everything in it. You know, if you're looking for something that's more, interactive, you could do the course that has like videos and quizzes and stuff, and you can do it's all organized and you can ask me questions directly, and you can do it at your own time. So I think for a lot of homeschoolers like using that. I think over probably 12 kids can do it on their own, and depending on their learning capacity. Uh but then below that, probably you need need to kind of help them through it. And then of course there's my YouTube channel, which is absolutely free.
Right.
The thing about the YouTube channel is it's not organized. Like there's all kinds of videos, there's different types of videos. There's more kind of vloggy style stuff. There's videos that are more for advanced chicken keeping, and there's beginner videos. So I think what people like about the course is that it's all just organized and you have access to it for as long as the course is online. You will be able to get in and then you get it like a little certificate at the end. So
which
there's
I
that
think
too.
is terrific. And I have to confess, we were well down the road into chicken keeping when I heard about your course. But if I was looking to begin the life of a chicken tender, you'll forgive the pun, I would definitely engage in the course. Because I think if just from what I've read in the book, the way you've organized this and you've made it so engaging and readable and fun, it would be an easy place to go to get good information. There's a question I want to ask you, and this is a little bit hard, but this happens when you have chickens that are pets and friends. And how do you deal with the loss of a chicken? How do you carry that conversation with your children? I know how I would, but I'd really love your insight into what happens when a hawk loves your chicken more than you do. And
Yeah.
those things
Everybody
happen.
loves chicken. Everybody loves a taste
Everybody loves chicken.
I mean, I would certainly bring in whatever philosophy you have in your family, bring that into the conversation. It's certainly an opportunity to discuss that, to discuss how your family views death. Um, the one thing that I like to focus on, and it's funny because I get messages from people all the time and they're devastated because of something that happened to a chicken. And what I will say to them is that chicken had a better life than most chickens in the world.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
most chickens in the world they can't even move.
Hmm.
And your chicken got to scratch the earth, got to, peck for bugs, got to feel the sun on its back, had an experience that wherever it goes, the next place it goes, it gets to carry that experience and that love with them into the next place. And that is what I say when it happens to me. I'm like, I feel guilty, like that's kind of my default is, what could I have done differently? But I try to remind myself, and really it's actually like my viewers and followers that will say, okay, Dalia, when this happened to me, this is what you told me. And, I'm like, okay, okay, okay. But,
Do all your chickens have names?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes I forget them, but, and some of them stand out more than others, but yeah, they all have names. And, I mean, with production breeds, especially, they're not bred for resilience. And this is really what I want everybody to remember. They are bred to lay a crazy amount of eggs for their first year of life. And usually what happens with production breeds that makes them die before their time is that they have complications having to do with that overactive reproductive system.
Right.
So you might even have a vet tell you, oh, well, you fed them too much and they had fatty liver. That really what that has to do with is their overactive ovaries, and it's causing like this kind of metabolic syndrome that they can get if they, I mean, of course, if you're giving them donuts and hamburgers and stuff, there's that. Okay. But a lot of the science that even veterinarians will have at their disposal comes through factory farms.
Right.
So in factory farms, it really is a concern that they don't even get to move, and they're just eating, eating, eating. That's like all they have to do. And so, yes, they get these fatty livers because they can't move in and then on top of that, there are these production breeds in a natural setting where your chicken has enough exercise, they're getting good nutrition, balanced nutrition, they got a good life, they're not stressed out. It's usually nothing that you did. It really isn't. And
Sometimes they reach the end of their lives and we're not ready for them to go, and they go anyway. And that's just hard. It really
yeah,
is.
and it's as hard as it is, for kids, it's an opportunity for them to have that experience and process through that experience because, a lot of us, certainly from my generation, we didn't deal with death until we lost a lot of times it's like until we lose one of our parents.
Right.
And then it's so shocking. The loss and the finality of it is so shocking that it's harder than it could have been, if we had had an opportunity to experience that finality in a kind of a gentler way to kind
I
of
think in
ease
the
into that
second year
reality.
that we kept chickens, we had a random dog from down the road come into our run,
Yeah.
and he really wasn't vicious. He just played them
Yeah.
all to death. And it was really
And then
awful.
they're like, oh, I really felt like I needed to do that, but now I don't know what has happened,
And
and they're
he was
whining
just
and
sitting there shaking like, I know I did something wrong. It was
yeah,
hard. It was awful, but it was also an opportunity to talk to our boys about, keep accounts short. No one's promised tomorrow. And man,
yeah.
I cried. I particularly cried over losing my rooster because he was just he would follow you around, and
Yeah.
he was just that social kind of. We've never quite had a rooster who is that social again. And
Yeah.
despite the fact that we'll raise them by hand, our current rooster was the bonus in the box from
Yeah.
last year when they arrived. And he's hilarious, but he's not the brightest crayon in the box either. Just not to be disrespectful or anything, but he's kind of special.
Yeah.
He'll get himself shut in the coop because he'll hop out of the yard and go around to the front of the coop, and then he can't figure out how.
I
The front of the
know. I
coop is where
know.
we keep all the feed and
It's
everything.
like
And he's like,
we
how did
did
I
this
get in here? How do I
yesterday.
get out?
Yeah, I had one, his name was Bubble Yum. He went to go live with a friend of mine, but every night he couldn't figure out how to get in the coop. It's like you literally did, you have done this from the time you were a baby chick. You cannot figure out how to get into the coop.
Sometimes you kind of wonder. Actually, we have a good question here. So how do you deal with a mean rooster?
Well, the first thing I like to say is, like it's you have to, this is another reason why you've got to have a contingency plan. Even if you can have roosters where you are, there are a few things to consider. Number one, like um you might have too many roosters for the amount of hens you have. Okay, so even
So
if you
is
can
there,
have
we had
roosters,
talked about this before the session began. Is there an ideal rooster to hen ratio?
I would say 8 to 10 hens per rooster, but it depends on the rooster and it depends on the hens. Okay, because if you have a flock of really submissive hens, they can get really, really stressed out. If you have hens that are like, who is this? You're like, not now, you know, then they'll be more, able
Right.
to handle it. Um, but yeah, it depends. And then sometimes a rooster can really favor one hen and put her through the ringer. So we don't want that. And for those reasons, you need to have a contingency plan. Now, I don't like to think of roosters as mean. I understand why people say that. But in their mind, they're like, well, we're doing our job. We're protecting our hens. And honestly, the mean roosters, unless they're like really awful and being awful to the hens, because sometimes they can be, but if they're very protective, um, they're the ones that are going to protect your chickens from a predator attack, and they will lay down their lives for that. So that's something to remember. That being said, a full-sized rooster that attacks a person, certainly if that person is small, like a kid, they can really hurt somebody,
Right.
you know. So it's I will tell people it's not a joke, like I hate seeing those videos of little kids being chased. You don't know how many adults I have talked to who to this day are afraid of chickens
Oh
because
yeah.
because an adult allowed them to get chased by a rooster and they laughed and took out their phone and video of it. It's like, don't do that. Um, so you have some options. Make sure that it's humane. If you're going to eat him, honor him. Um, the other thing is you can find somebody to rehome to. There are people in this world who will take whatever, your vegan friend, they take whatever. I had a lady who I swear she was like some kind of rooster whisperer. She could take any rooster and make them docile. I have
That's
no
amazing.
idea how she did that.
That's amazing.
They're-
We had a rooster once upon a time that hated my rain boots,
yeah.
and he was only aggressive if I wore my rain boots in the chicken. He hated them.
Well,
And
they
he
were
was an
obviously a
entirely,
threat.
they were an entirely, it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If I showed up in my rain boots, like on a rainy day like today, he was
Yeah.
like, oh no, I'm not having this.
Not in my
And the
coop.
rest of the time, he was just as nice as he could be.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, there's a lot of theories where people are like, they'll pick them up and walk around with them. They'll pick them up and like turn them backwards and walk around with them. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they'll calm down after the first year and be more manageable, because their hormones have kind of calmed down a little bit. Um, if they're not like a danger to you, you can go in and like assert yourself. Like you can go in with a broom, not to hit the rooster, because that'll probably make him worse, but to direct him out of the way, because you don't
Right.
want him to attack you. You don't want him to like get to you and make you run away,
Right.
because that just
Reinforces in his head
yes,
he's in charge. That's
yes.
very true.
Yeah. So, pick him up, try and pick him up or scoot him out of the way. Just go in there with a lot of confidence. I had a little rooster. His name was Philippe. He attacked me every single day of his life. He was also chronically ill. I cared for him. I spent money on him, all this stuff. And then at the end of his life, he stopped attacking me. And I knew that it was his
Oh,
last days. And he was a little guy, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But oh man, I cried when he died.
oh, that's so hard. It's hard. We love these things and man, sometimes they just don't live long enough either.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's the ones that you're really attached to that you really want to spend time with. So do your chickens come in your house?
Oh no, I've got dogs that are, first of all, I've got a kid, and an adult with allergies and asthma.
Oh,
Okay, so we have
okay.
to be very careful. Um, but my dogs,
Yeah,
they're
so your
not
dogs are not chicken lovers?
they cannot meet. They cannot come to. They
Got it.
love chicken,
You know,
but
it's
not
funny.
not.
I have three dogs, and two of them love the chickens, walk amongst the chickens, don't care. And the third one is like, that's lunch with feathers. And it's hard. And I see in chicken forums where people will say, how do I teach my dog to leave my chickens alone? And I'm like, well, sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you
Yeah,
can't.
it really depends. I mean, I have I'm sure there's like with the proper training you can do it, but if they ever have attacked the chickens, I would never trust that dog again
Right,
alone with the chickens. That doesn't mean that you can't have them, like I mean, I have them together. I just have to be diligent and keep them separate.
right.
Um and it's like it's just the dog's instincts. I have rescues, so it's a lot harder for me to train them at this point. Um but yeah, if you can work is it's certainly working with a dog from puppy
Yes.
would be the easiest.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of mine was a puppy raised around the chickens. He's a pug. He thinks he's the farm dog, so he thinks he's large and in charge. And he'll herd the chickens. If I say, Luigi, go make those chickens get out from under that bush, he'll go chase them out from under the bush. And then I'll say, come back here. And he's like, okay, I did my job.
Yeah.
And my other dog, I just love the chickens. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, so he just loved the chickens. He just wants to go sit around the chickens. My
Yeah.
third dog definitely thinks they're lunch on wheels. So,
Yeah.
I can't believe we're at the top of the hour. This conversation has been so much fun and it's
I
gone
know.
so fast. What closing words would you have for our listeners who are now energized with your love to
Yes.
begin a journey? What's the first thing they need to do? What a closing advice would you give them?
I would tell them, um as your foundation, I want you to remember that human beings have been keeping chickens for thousands of years. This is within us. It is a natural experience for us to have. We're not reinventing the wheel. Here in the Western world, we have a way of kind of like complicating things. But if you look at the whole world, you will find people and their chickens everywhere from every, um, you know, from the poorest people to the richest people, we're all able to do it. So remember that, and remember that chickens are very resilient. Like in general, they don't need a lot. Um, so just give them some food, give them water, give them shelter, and enjoy them. And always feel like you're doing something good, not just for you're doing something good for yourself, you're doing something good for the community and something good, really good for the world. So, yeah, do it.
I thank you so much for this time. This has been an amazing conversation, and I hope Dalia's love for chickens has come through to all of you, because it definitely was evident to me in our first conversation, and then I found my way to her YouTube channel and had a blast. So I encourage you to go check that out. All of those resources will be, including a connection to her course materials, will be in our show notes when you review those this week. Thank you so much for this time. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to the participants. All the questions were really great.
They were terrific questions. This is Gretchen Rowe for the Demme Learning Show. Thanks so much for joining us today. You can access the show notes and watch a recording at demmelearning.com/show or on our YouTube channel. Be sure to rate, review, or subscribe wherever you may be hearing this, especially if you really liked it. Take care, and we'll look forward to coming into your living rooms again soon.